Officer Marcus Bennett adjusted his uniform collar as he walked his beat through the upscale district near the royal palace. The morning sun cast long shadows across the pristine streets, where every building seemed to gleam with fresh paint and careful maintenance. This was his first week patrolling this area, a promotion he had worked years to achieve. The assignment came with prestige but also pressure. Nothing could go wrong here, not when the royal family lived just blocks away. Marcus had joined the police force 15 years ago, driven by a desire to serve and protect. He grew up in a rough neighborhood where crime was common and he wanted to make a difference. Over the years he had seen it all: domestic disputes, drug busts, robberies, and worse. His experience had taught him to react quickly and decisively. Sometimes that meant using force when necessary, though he always tried to de-escalate situations first. The Palace District was different from anywhere he had worked before. The streets were wider, lined with expensive shops and cafes. Well-dressed people walked their designer dogs, and luxury cars moved slowly through the carefully maintained roads. Security cameras watched from every corner, and private guards stood outside important buildings. Everyone here seemed to belong to a world Marcus had only seen in movies. As he walked past a small park near the palace gates, Marcus noticed something unusual. A young girl, maybe 8 or 9 years old, was standing alone by the fountain. She had dark curly hair and wore a simple blue dress that looked expensive but was now dirty and wrinkled. The child appeared distressed, looking around frantically as if searching for someone. Marcus approached slowly, his training kicking in. Lost children in this area could mean several things: a kidnapping, a family emergency, or worse. He had to be careful. The girl noticed him coming and took a step back, her eyes wide with fear. This reaction surprised Marcus. Most children weren't afraid of police officers, especially in nice neighborhoods like this. "Hello there," Marcus said gently, crouching down to her level. "I'm Officer Bennett. Are you okay? Where are your parents?" The girl shook her head vigorously and took another step backward. She was clearly upset, tears starting to form in her eyes. Marcus noticed she kept looking toward the palace gates as if expecting someone to appear. Her behavior was strange, almost like she was trying to get there, but something was stopping her. "I need to go home," the girl said in a small voice. "They're waiting for me." Marcus stood up and looked around the park. There were a few other people nearby: an elderly man feeding pigeons, a woman jogging, and a couple sitting on a bench. None of them seemed to be looking for a lost child. He pulled out his radio to call for backup, thinking this might be more complicated than it appeared. "Control, this is Bennett. I have a possible missing child in Royal Park. Female, approximately 8 years old, appears distressed. Requesting assistance to locate parents or guardians." The girl heard the radio and became more agitated. She started walking quickly toward the palace gates, but Marcus gently caught her arm. "Wait, sweetheart. You can't go that way. Those are restricted areas. Let me help you find your family." But the girl pulled away from him with surprising strength. "You don't understand. I live there. They're expecting me." Marcus felt a chill run down his spine. This was exactly the kind of situation they had been warned about during training for this district. Sometimes mentally unstable people, including children, would claim connections to the royal family. It was a form of delusion that required careful handling. The last thing he needed was to let a disturbed child near the palace grounds. The girl started running toward the gates, and Marcus had no choice but to follow. She was fast for her age, dodging between the few pedestrians on the sidewalk. Marcus called out for her to stop, but she kept running. His training told him he needed to contain the situation before it escalated. As they approached the palace gates, Marcus could see the royal guards standing at attention. They wore their traditional red uniforms and tall black hats, looking straight ahead as they always did. The girl was heading directly for them, and Marcus knew he had to stop her before she created an international incident. "Stop right there," Marcus shouted, catching up to the girl just as she reached the gate. He grabbed her arm more firmly this time, but she struggled against him. "Let me go. My papa works here."
"He's waiting for me,"
the girl cried out, her voice echoing off the palace walls. The royal guards remained motionless, as they were trained to do. They wouldn't break protocol even if a child was crying right in front of them. Marcus appreciated their discipline, but it didn't help his current situation. He needed to get this girl away from the palace before her delusions caused real problems. Marcus tried to reason with her again. "Listen, I understand you're upset, but you can't be here. This is a restricted area. Let me take you to the station and we'll find your real family. The word real seemed to set something off in the girl. She began screaming and fighting against Marcus's grip with renewed energy. Her cries were loud and desperate, attracting attention from passers-by who stopped to watch the scene unfold. Marcus felt the weight of all those eyes on him. This was his first week in the prestigious Palace District, and already he was dealing with a public disturbance. His supervisor would not be pleased if this incident made the news. He needed to resolve it quickly and quietly. The girl continued to struggle, and Marcus realized she wasn't going to come willingly. His years of experience told him that sometimes force was necessary to protect both the public and the person involved. A disturbed child near the royal palace was a security risk that couldn't be ignored. Marcus reached for his radio again, but the girl broke free and ran a few more steps toward the palace entrance. She was getting too close to the actual building now, and Marcus could see the tension in the royal guard's shoulders even though they maintained their positions. This was the moment when Marcus made the decision that would change everything. He needed to stop the girl immediately, before she got any closer to the palace. His hand moved to his belt where his taser hung ready for use. It wasn't something he wanted to do, but 15 years of police work had taught him that sometimes you had to act fast to prevent bigger problems. The girl was small and clearly distressed, but she was also heading toward one of the most secure buildings in the country. Marcus couldn't take any chances. He pulled out his taser and aimed it at the child, his finger hovering over the trigger as he made the calculation that would haunt him forever. The taser discharge echoed through the morning air like a sharp crack of thunder. The little girl's body went rigid for a moment before she collapsed onto the pristine sidewalk in front of the palace gates. Marcus watched in horror as the child convulsed briefly, then lay still, her small frame looking even smaller against the gray stone pavement. Silence fell over the scene like a heavy blanket. The few pedestrians who had been watching stood frozen in shock. Even the pigeons in the nearby park seemed to have stopped their morning chatter. Marcus stared down at the motionless girl, his taser still in his shaking hand, as the reality of what he had just done began to sink in. One of the royal guards, despite his training to remain motionless, turned his head slightly to look at the scene. His face remained expressionless, but Marcus caught a glimpse of something in the man's eyes that made his stomach turn. It wasn't anger or disgust, but something worse, disappointment mixed with disbelief. Marcus dropped to his knees beside the girl and checked for a pulse. She was breathing but unconscious, her face pale against her dark curls. Her small hands were scraped from hitting the pavement, and there was a small cut on her forehead where she had fallen. The sight of blood on the child's face made Marcus feel sick. "Call an ambulance," he shouted to the gathering crowd, though he was already reaching for his radio. His hands were shaking so badly he could barely hold the device steady. This wasn't how things were supposed to go. He was supposed to be protecting people, not hurting children. The radio crackled to life as dispatch responded to his emergency call. Within minutes, the area would be swarming with paramedics, supervisors, and investigators. Marcus knew his career was probably over, but right now all he could think about was the little girl lying unconscious at his feet. As they waited for the ambulance, Marcus tried to piece together what had gone wrong. The girl had seemed genuinely distressed, not like the usual troublemakers he dealt with. Her clothes were expensive, her speech was educated, and she had seemed truly convinced that she belonged at the palace. But that was impossible, wasn't it? Children didn't just live at the royal palace. A woman from the crowd approached hesitantly. She was well-dressed and appeared to be in her 50s with kind eyes and a concerned expression. "Officer, I saw what happened. That poor child. She was just scared and confused. Did you really need to use that weapon on her?" Marcus couldn't meet the woman's eyes. He knelt beside the girl, gently brushing a curl away from her face. She was heading for a restricted area. "I had to stop her before. I thought she might be dangerous." The woman's expression hardened. "Dangerous? She's a baby. Look at her, she couldn't weigh more than 60 pounds. How could you possibly think she was dangerous?" More people began to gather, and Marcus could hear the murmur of angry voices growing louder. Someone had pulled out a phone and was recording the scene. He knew this footage would be all over social media within hours, probably with captions about police brutality and excessive force. The ambulance arrived with sirens wailing, followed closely by several police cars. Paramedics rushed to the girl's side, checking her vital signs and carefully examining her for injuries. One of them, a young woman with short blonde hair, looked up at Marcus with barely concealed anger. "What the hell were you thinking?" she whispered harshly as she worked. "She's just a kid. Look how small she is." Marcus stepped back to give the paramedics room to work, but he couldn't take his eyes off the girl. She looked so peaceful lying there, as if she were simply taking a nap in the sunshine. It was hard to believe that just minutes before she had been fighting him with such determination. His supervisor, Captain Rodriguez, arrived on the scene looking grim. Rodriguez was a veteran officer with over 20 years of experience, and Marcus had always respected him. But the look on the captain's face now was one of deep disappointment and barely controlled anger. "Bennett, what the hell happened here?" Rodriguez demanded, pulling Marcus aside. "I get a call that one of my officers just tasered a child in front of the Royal Palace?" "Please tell me there's more to this story." Marcus tried to explain the situation, but even as he spoke, he realized how weak his justification sounded. A scared little girl running toward the palace didn't seem like much of a threat when he put it into words. He had acted on instinct, but maybe his instincts were wrong. "She was heading for the restricted area, sir. She claimed to live at the palace, which seemed like a delusion. I was concerned about security." Marcus trailed off, knowing his explanation wasn't good enough. Rodriguez shook his head slowly. "A delusion? Bennett, do you have any idea who this child might actually be? Did you bother to ask her name before you decided she was a threat?" The question hit Marcus like a punch to the gut. In all his years of police work, he had always prided himself on being thorough. He asked questions, gathered information, and tried to understand situations before acting. But today he had seen a child running toward the palace and immediately assumed the worst. "No, sir. She was running, and I was concerned about the security implications. She seemed distressed and wasn't responding to my attempts to help her." Captain Rodriguez looked over at the girl, who was now being loaded onto a stretcher. The paramedics had stabilized her, and she appeared to be regaining consciousness. Her eyes fluttered open, and she looked around in confusion before starting to cry. "Mama?" the girl called out weakly. "I want my mama." "Where's Papa?" The sound of her small, frightened voice made Marcus's chest tighten with guilt. She sounded so young and vulnerable, nothing like the security threat he had convinced himself she was. He watched as the paramedics comforted her, speaking in gentle tones as they prepared to transport her to the hospital. Rodriguez turned back to Marcus with a severe expression. "Bennett, you're suspended pending a full investigation. Turn in your weapon and badge. Internal Affairs will want to speak with you, and there will probably be criminal charges depending on how this plays out." Marcus nodded numbly, understanding that his career was over. He had worked 15 years to get to this prestigious assignment, and he had destroyed it all in a matter of minutes. But more than his career, he was worried about the little girl. What if he had seriously injured her? What if she never fully recovered? As the ambulance pulled away with its small passenger, Marcus noticed something that made his blood run cold. One of the royal guards, the same one who had turned to watch the incident, was now speaking urgently into a hidden microphone. His face had gone pale, and there was an expression of panic in his eyes that Marcus had never seen in a royal guard before. Something was very wrong, and Marcus was beginning to suspect that the little girl might not have been delusional after all. Inside the palace walls, Sergeant James Whitmore of the Royal Guard was having the worst day of his 15-year military career. He stood at attention in the ornate hallway outside the Queen's private office, his red uniform perfectly pressed despite the cold sweat that was forming beneath it. His hands remained steady at his sides, but his mind was racing with thoughts of his daughter Sophia, who should have been safely at school but was instead lying in a hospital bed. James had received the emergency call 20 minutes ago. His commanding officer, Colonel Harrison, had delivered the news with military precision but visible concern. A police officer had used a taser on a child near the palace gates. That child was Sophia Whitmore, age 8, daughter of one of the most trusted members of the Royal Guard. The irony wasn't lost on James. He had spent his entire adult life protecting the royal family, ensuring their safety from any possible threat. Now his own daughter had been treated as if she were one of those threats, hurt by the very people who were supposed to protect the public. The bitter taste of that realization made him clench his jaw, though his expression remained perfectly neutral. Sophia had been on her way to visit him during her lunch break from the private school located just blocks from the palace. It was a tradition they had started when she was 5. Every Wednesday, she would walk to the palace gates where James would meet her for a few minutes between his duties. The palace security knew her by sight, and special arrangements had been made to allow these brief visits. But today was different. Sophia's school had dismissed early due to a broken heating system, and she had decided to surprise her father by coming to see him. She knew the route by heart and had walked it dozens of times before. What she hadn't known was that there was a new police officer patrolling the area, someone who didn't recognize her and didn't understand her connection to the palace. James thought back to that morning when he had kissed Sophia goodbye before leaving for work. She had been excited about a drawing she was making for him, something she planned to show him during their Wednesday visit. Now that drawing was probably still in her backpack while she lay unconscious in a hospital room. The door to the Queen's office opened, and Colonel Harrison emerged with a grave expression. Behind him, James could see several other high-ranking officials, all looking serious and concerned. This incident had reached the highest levels of palace security, which meant there would be consequences for everyone involved. "Sergeant Whitmore," Colonel Harrison said formally, "Her Majesty wishes to speak with you." James entered the office and stood at attention. The Queen, a woman in her 70s with silver hair and intelligent eyes, sat behind an antique desk, covered with papers and official documents. She looked up at him with genuine concern, the kind of expression a grandmother might have when hearing that a child had been hurt. "Sergeant Whitmore, please sit down," she said gently. "I've been told about what happened to your daughter. How is she?" James remained standing as protocol dictated, but his voice was tight with emotion when he spoke. "She's conscious now, Your Majesty. The doctors say she should recover fully, though they're keeping her for observation. She has some scrapes and bruises from the fall, and she's quite shaken by the experience." The Queen nodded slowly. "I understand she was coming to visit you when this happened. This is unacceptable, Sergeant. A child should never be treated this way, especially not one who belongs to our extended palace family." James felt a surge of gratitude toward the Queen for referring to Sophia as part of the palace family. It was true. The children of long-serving palace staff were often treated with special care and consideration. Sophia had grown up knowing many of the staff members and had even met some of the younger royals during special events. "Your Majesty, I understand that the officer was new to this area and didn't recognize Sophia. However, her behavior toward him was not threatening. She was simply trying to reach the gates to see me." The Queen's expression hardened slightly. "I've been briefed on the incident. A grown man used a weapon designed to incapacitate adults on an 8-year-old child. There is no justification for such excessive force regardless of the circumstances." Colonel Harrison stepped forward. "Ma'am, we've already been in contact with the police department. The officer has been suspended, and there will be a full investigation. We're also reviewing our security protocols to ensure this never happens again." James appreciated the support from his superiors, but he was struggling with conflicting emotions. As a soldier, he understood the need for security and the difficulty of making split-second decisions. As a father, he was furious that someone had hurt his little girl. The two sides of his nature were at war with each other. "Sergeant Whitmore," the Queen continued, "I want you to take leave to be with your daughter. Your family comes first right now. We'll handle the official response to this incident. Thank you, Your Majesty, but I would prefer to remain on duty. Sophia will need time to recover, but I don't want this incident to disrupt palace operations." The Queen smiled slightly. "Your dedication is admirable, but this isn't a request. You need to be with your family. Colonel Harrison will arrange for your replacement duties." James knew better than to argue with a direct order from the Queen. He nodded and prepared to leave, but the Queen stopped him with one more comment. "Sergeant Whitmore, I want you to know that this incident reflects poorly on our security arrangements, not on your daughter or your family. Sophia did nothing wrong. She was simply a child trying to see her father. The fact that she was treated as a threat says more about our failures than hers." As James left the Queen's office, he felt a mixture of relief and anger. Relief that Sophia would be okay and that the palace was supporting his family. Anger that his daughter had been hurt by someone who was supposed to protect people like her. He had always believed in the system, in the idea that good people working together could keep everyone safe. But today, that belief had been shaken. Walking through the palace corridors toward the exit, James passed several colleagues who nodded sympathetically. Word had spread quickly through the palace staff about what had happened. Many of them had children too, and they understood the horror of imagining their own kids in Sophia's situation. As he reached the palace gates, James paused to look at the spot where Sophia had fallen. There was no sign of the incident now. The pavement had been cleaned and normal foot traffic had resumed. But James could picture exactly what had happened, and the image made his hands clench into fists. One of the guards on duty approached him carefully. "Sergeant Whitmore, I was here when it happened. I'm sorry we couldn't intervene. Protocol required us to remain at our posts. But watching that officer hurt your little girl, it was one of the hardest things I've ever had to do." James nodded, understanding the impossible position his colleagues had been in. They were trained to maintain their posts no matter what happened around them. But they were also human beings who had watched a child being hurt. "Thank you for telling me," James said quietly. "I know you would have helped if you could." As James headed toward the hospital to be with Sophia, he couldn't shake the feeling that this incident was far from over. The officer who had hurt his daughter would face consequences, but James wanted to understand how such a terrible mistake had been allowed to happen. Someone needed to be held accountable for the system failures that had put Sophia in danger. More importantly, he needed to help his daughter heal from this trauma and restore her faith in the people who were supposed to protect her. The hospital room was painted in soft yellow, designed to be calming for young patients, but Sophia Whitmore still felt scared. She lay in the narrow bed with white sheets pulled up to her chin, her dark curls spread across the pillow like a cloud. The machines around her beeped quietly, monitoring her heart rate and other vital signs that the doctors said were all normal now. Sophia touched the small bandage on her forehead where she had scraped it during her fall. The spot was tender, but it didn't hurt as much as the confusion and fear she felt inside. She kept replaying the moment when the police officer had pointed that strange black device at her. She had seen tasers on television shows, but she never imagined one would be used on her. Her mother, Elena Whitmore, sat in the chair beside the bed, holding Sophia's small hand in both of hers. Elena worked as a nurse in a different hospital across the city, so she understood the medical side of what had happened. But as a mother, she was struggling to contain her anger and fear. Her usually calm demeanor was cracked with worry lines around her eyes. "Mama, why did that man hurt me?" Sophia asked for the third time since waking up. "I told him Papa works at the palace. I told him I was supposed to meet Papa." Elena smoothed her daughter's hair gently. "I don't know, sweetheart. Sometimes grown-ups make bad decisions when they're scared or confused. It doesn't make it right, but it happens." Sophia frowned, trying to understand. At 8 years old, her world was still mostly black and white. Good people helped others and bad people hurt them. Police officers were supposed to be good people, but this one had hurt her. It didn't make sense in her young mind. "Is Papa coming?" Sophia asked, looking toward the door hopefully. "Yes, darling. He's on his way from the palace. The Queen herself told him to come be with you." Sophia's eyes widened. "The Queen knows what happened to me?" Elena nodded, managing a small smile despite her worry. "She's very concerned about you. You're important to the palace family, remember? Papa has protected them for years, and they care about our family too." This made Sophia feel a little better. She had met some of the royal family members at special events, and they had always been kind to her. Knowing that they cared about what had happened made her feel less alone and frightened. The door opened, and James Whitmore entered the room still wearing his red Royal Guard uniform. His normally perfect posture was slightly slumped with exhaustion and worry. When he saw Sophia awake and talking, relief flooded his features and he hurried to her bedside. "Papa!" Sophia reached up for him, and James carefully gathered her into his arms, mindful of the wires and monitors attached to her small body. "I'm here, little star," he whispered, using his pet name for her. "I'm so sorry this happened to you. I'm so sorry I wasn't there to protect you." Sophia pulled back to look at his face, surprised by the pain she saw there. She had never seen her strong father look so sad and worried. "It's not your fault, Papa. You were working. You're always working to keep people safe." James felt his throat tighten with emotion. Even after being hurt by a police officer, his daughter was trying to comfort him. Her innocence and forgiveness made him feel both proud and heartbroken at the same time. Elena stood up and embraced her husband, careful not to disturb Sophia. "The doctors say she'll be fine physically. No lasting damage from the taser or the fall. But James, she keeps asking why it happened. How do we explain this to an 8-year-old? James sat down on the edge of the hospital bed, keeping one arm around Sophia. We tell her the truth in a way she can understand. Some people make mistakes, even people who are supposed to help others. It doesn't mean all police officers are bad, just like it doesn't mean all people are bad. Sophia listened carefully to her father's words. She trusted him more than anyone in the world, and if he said most police officers were good people, then she would try to believe that. But she also knew she would be afraid the next time she saw a police car or an officer in uniform. "Papa, can I still come visit you at work on Wednesdays?" Sophia asked quietly. James felt his heart break a little more. The fact that his daughter was worried about losing their special tradition after what had happened showed how much those visits meant to her. They meant just as much to him. "Of course you can, little star. But from now on, I'll meet you at the school and walk with you to the palace. We'll make sure everyone knows who you are and that you belong there." Sophia nodded, satisfied with this solution. She wasn't afraid of going back to the palace. That was her safe place where her father worked and where important people knew and cared about her family. She was afraid of encountering another confused police officer who might not understand that she belonged there. A soft knock on the door interrupted their conversation. A woman in a business suit entered, carrying a large bouquet of flowers and a gift bag. She had kind eyes and spoke with a refined accent that suggested she worked in an official capacity. "Mr. and Mrs. Whitmore, I'm Sarah Collins from the palace's public relations office. Her Majesty asked me to bring these gifts for Sophia and to check on how she's doing." Sophia's eyes lit up at the mention of gifts from the Queen. Elena accepted the flowers, while James helped Sophia open the gift bag. Inside was a beautiful stuffed horse with a golden bridle and a handwritten note on royal stationery. James read the note aloud. "Dear Sophia, I was very sorry to hear about your frightening experience today. You are a brave little girl, and I hope these small gifts will help you feel better. You will always be welcome at the palace. With warm regards, Her Majesty." Sophia hugged the stuffed horse tightly, her face glowing with happiness. "Papa, the Queen wrote to me." "She knows my name." Sarah Collins smiled warmly. Her Majesty was quite concerned when she heard what happened. She wanted Sophia to know that this incident doesn't change her relationship with the palace family. Elena felt tears forming in her eyes. The royal family's kindness and support meant more to her than any official apology or legal settlement could. They were treating Sophia not as a victim or a problem to be managed, but as a cherished member of their extended family. "Please tell Her Majesty how much this means to our family," Elena said. "Sophia has always loved her visits to see her father at work. Knowing that she's still welcome there will help her heal from this experience." After Sarah Collins left, the family spent the evening together in the hospital room. Sophia showed her parents the drawing she had been carrying in her backpack, a picture of herself standing next to James in his red uniform in front of the palace gates. At the bottom she had written, "My papa is a hero," in her careful 8-year-old handwriting. James looked at the drawing and felt a renewed sense of purpose. His daughter saw him as a hero, someone who protected people and kept them safe. The police officer who had hurt Sophia had failed in that mission, but James would not fail his daughter. He would make sure she felt safe and protected, and he would work to prevent anything like this from happening to other children. As Sophia drifted off to sleep holding her new stuffed horse, James and Elena talked quietly about the future. They knew there would be investigations, interviews, and probably media attention. But their priority was helping their daughter process this trauma and maintain her faith in the good people who surrounded her. The police station felt different to Marcus Bennett now. What had once been a second home, filled with colleagues who respected his experience and dedication, now felt like hostile territory. He sat in the small interrogation room where he had questioned hundreds of suspects over the years. But this time he was on the other side of the table. Detective Lisa Morgan sat across from him, her notepad open and her expression carefully neutral. Marcus had worked with Lisa before and had always considered her fair and thorough. But today, there was a coldness in her demeanor that made it clear this was strictly business. "Let's go through this one more time, Marcus," Lisa said, her pen poised over her notepad. "You encountered the child at approximately 10:30 a.m. near the fountain in Royal Park. What made you approach her initially?" Marcus rubbed his temples, feeling the weight of the sleepless night he had spent replaying the incident over and over in his mind. She appeared to be lost or distressed. She was alone, which seemed unusual for that area and time of day. As a police officer, I felt obligated to check on her welfare. And when you approached her, what was her reaction? She seemed frightened and took a step back. She was looking toward the palace gates as if she wanted to go there. When I tried to talk to her, she became more agitated. Lisa made notes as he spoke. According to witness statements, the child told you she lived at the palace and that her father worked there. How did you respond to that information? Marcus felt his stomach clench with guilt. I assumed it was a delusion. You know how it is in this district. We get people making false claims about connections to the royal family all the time. I thought she might be mentally disturbed. Did you attempt to verify her claims in any way? Did you ask for her name, contact information for her parents, or check with palace security? This was the question Marcus had been dreading. In all his years of police work, he had always prided himself on being thorough and professional. But in this case, he had made assumptions without gathering basic information. No, I didn't. She was running toward the palace gates and I was focused on the potential security threat. I should have asked more questions, but things happened very quickly. Lisa looked up from her notepad and Marcus could see disappointment in her eyes. Marcus, you've been a police officer for 15 years. You know the importance of gathering information before taking action. Help me understand why you deviated from standard procedure in this case. Marcus had been asking himself the same question for the past 24 hours. Why had he been so quick to assume the worst about a frightened child? Why hadn't he taken a moment to calm her down and find out who she really was? I think I was intimidated by the assignment, he admitted reluctantly. This was my first week in the Palace District. I knew how important security was in that area, and I was worried about making a mistake that could have serious consequences. When I saw a child running toward the palace claiming to live there, I panicked. So your response to being worried about making a mistake was to use a taser on an 8-year-old girl? The blunt question hit Marcus like a physical blow. When put that way, his actions seemed not just wrong, but absurd. He had been so focused on preventing one kind of mistake that he had made a much worse one. I realize how it sounds, but in that moment, I felt I had no choice. She wasn't responding to verbal commands, and she was getting closer to a restricted area. I thought the taser would be the safest way to stop her without causing serious harm. Lisa set down her pen and leaned back in her chair. Marcus, I've reviewed the security footage from the palace gates. Do you want to know what I saw? Marcus nodded, though he wasn't sure he wanted to hear the answer. I saw a scared little girl who was clearly trying to get to someone she trusted. When she reached the gates, she didn't try to climb them or force her way through. She called out toward the guards, asking for her papa. She behaved exactly like a child who was familiar with that location and expected to be recognized. The words felt like knives in Marcus's chest. He had been so focused on what the girl might do that he hadn't paid attention to what she was actually doing. Her behavior had been that of a child seeking help and safety, not someone intent on causing harm. I've also spoken with the royal guards who were on duty, Lisa continued. They confirmed that Sophia Whitmore has been visiting her father at the palace regularly for 3 years. They knew her by sight and were expecting her that day, though she arrived earlier than usual due to an early dismissal from school. Sophia Whitmore. Now the child had a name, which made Marcus feel even worse about what he had done. She wasn't just the girl anymore, she was Sophia, daughter of a man who had dedicated his life to protecting the royal family, a child who had done nothing wrong except try to visit her father at work. Detective Morgan, Marcus said quietly, I need you to know that I feel terrible about what happened. If I could go back and handle it differently, I would. But I can't change what I did. Lisa picked up her pen again. The district attorney is reviewing the case for possible criminal charges. Using excessive force against a minor is a serious offense, Marcus. Even if your intentions were good, the fact remains that you used a weapon designed for adult suspects on a child who posed no real threat. Marcus nodded, understanding the gravity of his situation. He had known since the moment he pulled the trigger that his career was over, but the possibility of criminal charges added a new layer of fear. He could face jail time for his mistake. There's something else you need to know, Lisa continued. The incident was recorded by multiple witnesses and has already appeared on social media. The video shows a police officer using a taser on a small child near the royal palace. It's gone viral, and there's significant public outrage. Marcus closed his eyes, imagining the headlines and social media posts condemning his actions. He thought about his own family, his wife Sarah and their teenage son David. They would have to endure the shame and scrutiny that came with his mistake. His son would have to face classmates who had seen the video of his father hurting a child. The police department is under enormous pressure to take strong action, Lisa explained. The palace has issued a statement expressing concern for Sophia's welfare and support for a thorough investigation. Several civil rights organizations are calling for your prosecution. The irony wasn't lost on Marcus that the very institution he had been trying to protect, the royal palace, was now supporting an investigation that could destroy his life. But he couldn't blame them. They were defending one of their own, just as he would have done in their position. "Detective, what can you tell me about Sophia's condition? Is she going to be okay?" Lisa's expression softened slightly. "Physically, she's fine. The taser didn't cause any permanent damage, and her injuries from the fall were minor. Emotionally, it's harder to say. She's traumatized by the experience, but she has a strong family support system." Marcus felt a small measure of relief knowing that Sophia would recover physically, but the thought of the emotional damage he might have caused made him feel sick. How do you explain to an 8-year-old why a police officer, someone who was supposed to protect her, had hurt her instead? "I'd like to apologize to her family," Marcus said. "I know it won't undo what I did, but I want them to know how sorry I am." Lisa shook her head. "That's not advisable right now. Any contact with the family could be seen as an attempt to influence their cooperation with the investigation. Your lawyer will advise you on the best way to handle that." Marcus realized he would need a lawyer, something he had never imagined when he woke up yesterday morning as a respected police officer. Now he was a defendant in a potential criminal case, facing charges that could destroy everything he had worked for. "The suspension is indefinite pending the outcome of the investigation," Lisa said, closing her notepad. "You'll need to surrender your badge and service weapon today. Internal Affairs will schedule additional interviews as the investigation proceeds." As Marcus left the police station for what might be the last time as an officer, he thought about the chain of events that had led to this moment. A series of small decisions and assumptions had culminated in a single, terrible action that had hurt an innocent child and destroyed his career. He drove home slowly, dreading the conversation he would have to have with his family. His wife Sarah was a teacher, and she had always been proud of his work in law enforcement. His son David had been considering following in his footsteps and becoming a police officer himself. Now Marcus would have to explain how he had betrayed everything they believed about justice and protecting the innocent. The house felt empty when he arrived, though Sarah's car was in the driveway. He found her in the kitchen, sitting at the table with her laptop open and a cup of coffee growing cold beside her. She looked up when he entered, and he could see that she had been crying. "I saw the video, Marcus," she said quietly. "Someone from David's school sent it to me. They wanted to know if it was really you." Marcus sat down across from her, feeling older than his 42 years. "It was me. I made a terrible mistake, Sarah. I hurt a little girl who was just trying to see her father." Sarah closed the laptop and reached across the table to take his hand. "Tell me what happened. Help me understand how the man I married, the man who coaches Little League and volunteers at the animal shelter, could do something like this." For the next hour, Marcus told his wife everything about his nervousness in the new assignment, his assumptions about Sophia, and the split-second decision that had changed everything. Sarah listened without judgment, but he could see the pain and confusion in her eyes. "What happens now?" she asked when he finished. "I'm suspended indefinitely. There might be criminal charges. Our lives are about to become very public and very difficult." Sarah squeezed his hand tighter. "We'll get through this together. But Marcus, you need to find a way to make this right. That little girl and her family deserve better than what you gave them." Marcus nodded, knowing his wife was right. He had to find a way to take responsibility for his actions and hopefully help Sophia and her family heal from the trauma he had caused. It wouldn't undo what he had done, but it might be a first step toward redemption. 3 weeks after the incident, the small conference room at the police station had been transformed into a meeting space for what everyone hoped would be a healing conversation. The walls were decorated with children's drawings from Sophia's class, who had sent get-well cards after hearing about what happened to their classmate. Sunlight streamed through the windows, making the room feel warmer and less official than usual. Sophia sat between her parents, James and Elena, her small hands folded in her lap. She wore a yellow dress that Elena had chosen because it was Sophia's favorite color. and her dark curls had been carefully braided with matching yellow ribbons. The bandage on her forehead was gone now, leaving only a small pink scar that would fade with time. Across the table sat Marcus Bennett, looking very different from the confident police officer he had been a month ago. His face was drawn with stress and sleepless nights, and his hands shook slightly as he placed a small wrapped package on the table. Beside him sat his lawyer, a middle-aged woman who had insisted on being present for any meeting with the Whitmore family. Detective Morgan had arranged this meeting at the request of both families. While the criminal investigation was still ongoing, both sides had expressed a desire to have a face-to-face conversation. It was unusual, but given the unique circumstances and the ages of those involved, the department had agreed to facilitate it. "Thank you all for coming," Detective Morgan began. "This is not part of the official investigation, and nothing said here will be used in any legal proceedings. This is simply an opportunity for Mr. Bennett to speak directly to Sophia and her family." Marcus looked at Sophia, and his heart broke all over again. She was so small, so innocent, and he could see the wariness in her eyes when she looked at him. The trust that children naturally had for police officers was gone, replaced by fear and confusion. "Sophia," Marcus said gently, "my name is Marcus Bennett. I'm the police officer who hurt you 3 weeks ago. I asked to meet you today because I wanted to tell you how sorry I am for what I did." Sophia looked up at her father, who nodded encouragingly. She had been nervous about this meeting. But James had explained that sometimes when people make mistakes, they need to apologize and try to make things better. "I know you're probably scared of me," Marcus continued, "and I don't blame you. What I did was wrong, and I want you to know that it wasn't your fault. You didn't do anything wrong that day. You were just trying to visit your papa at work, which is something you should be able to do safely." Sophia listened carefully, her 8-year-old mind trying to process the adult concepts of apology and responsibility. "Why did you hurt me?" she asked in a small voice. "I told you my papa works at the palace." Marcus felt tears forming in his eyes. "You did tell me that, and I should have listened to you. Instead, I made assumptions about you that were wrong. I was scared and confused, but that's no excuse for hurting you." Elena reached over and squeezed Sophia's hand. She had prepared her daughter for this meeting by explaining that people sometimes make bad decisions when they're afraid, but that doesn't make those decisions okay. "I brought you something," Marcus said, pushing the wrapped package across the table. "It's not much and it doesn't make up for what I did, but I hoped you might like it." Sophia looked at her parents, who nodded their permission. She carefully unwrapped the package to reveal a children's book about a little girl who becomes friends with the palace guards. Inside the front cover, Marcus had written, "To Sophia, a brave and kind girl who deserves only good things. I'm sorry I scared you. Officer Bennett." Sophia examined the book carefully, running her fingers over the colorful illustrations. "Thank you," she said politely, the way her parents had taught her to respond to gifts. James had been quiet during the exchange, studying Marcus with the sharp eyes of someone trained to assess threats and character. What he saw was not the monster he had imagined, but a broken man who genuinely regretted his actions. "Mr. Bennett," James said finally, "I appreciate you taking responsibility for what happened to my daughter. As someone who works in security, I understand that split-second decisions can have serious consequences. But as a father, I'm struggling to forgive the fact that you used a weapon on my child." Marcus nodded, understanding James's conflicted feelings. "I don't expect forgiveness, Sergeant Whitmore. What I did was inexcusable. I just wanted Sophia to know that she did nothing wrong, and that most police officers would never hurt a child." Sophia looked up at Marcus with curious eyes. "Are you still a police officer?" Marcus exchanged glances with his lawyer before answering. "No, Sophia. I had to stop being a police officer because of what I did to you. When police officers make big mistakes that hurt people, they can't keep their jobs." This seemed to satisfy Sophia's sense of fairness. In her young mind, if someone did something wrong, there should be consequences. The fact that Marcus had lost his job because of what he did to her made the situation feel more balanced. Elena spoke for the first time since the introductions. "Mr. Bennett, Sophia has been having nightmares since the incident. She's afraid of police officers now, which is heartbreaking because we've always taught her that they're there to help people. How do we help her overcome that fear?" Marcus looked at Sophia thoughtfully. "Maybe Maybe Sophia could meet some other police officers? Good ones who could show her that not all officers are like me. I know Detective Morgan has been working on this case, and she's one of the best people I know. Detective Morgan nodded. We've actually been planning a community outreach event at Sophia's school. It might help if she could see police officers interacting positively with children her age. Sophia seemed interested in this idea. She had always been curious about her father's work protecting people, and the idea of meeting police officers who were kind and helpful appealed to her sense of justice. I have a question, Sophia said, looking directly at Marcus. When you saw me running, why didn't you run with me to see where I was going? That's what my papa would do if he saw a scared kid. The simple wisdom of her question hit Marcus like a thunderbolt. Why hadn't he simply followed her to see where she was going? Why hadn't he approached the situation with curiosity instead of suspicion? A child had provided the insight that might have prevented the entire incident. You're absolutely right, Sophia, Marcus said with genuine admiration. That's exactly what I should have done. You're a very smart girl, and your papa is lucky to have you. Sophia smiled for the first time since the meeting began, pleased to have her intelligence recognized by an adult. James felt a surge of pride watching his daughter handle this difficult situation with such grace and maturity. As the meeting concluded, Marcus stood up slowly. Sophia, I want you to know that if you ever see me anywhere, you don't have to be afraid. I will never hurt you or any other child again. And if you ever need help and there's no one else around, I would still help you, because that's what people should do for each other. Sophia considered this carefully. Okay, she said simply, but I hope I don't see you again because that would mean something bad happened. Marcus couldn't help but smile at her logic. That's very wise, Sophia. I hope you never need any police officers' help because that would mean you're always safe and happy. As the families prepared to leave, James approached Marcus privately. Bennett, I can see that you genuinely regret what happened. That doesn't excuse it, but it matters. I hope you find a way to use this experience to help other people. Marcus shook James's hand, feeling a small measure of peace for the first time in weeks. The meeting hadn't magically fixed everything, and he still faced serious legal consequences, but he had been able to look Sophia in the eye and take responsibility for his actions. It was a start. 1 year later, the community center in downtown was buzzing with activity as families gathered for the annual Police and Community Safety Fair. Children ran between booths displaying police equipment, fire trucks, and emergency response demonstrations. The atmosphere was festive, filled with laughter and the smell of cotton candy and popcorn from vendor stands. Sophia Whitmore stood confidently beside a display table, wearing a junior police badge that Detective Morgan had given her earlier that day. At 9 years old, she had grown taller and more self-assured, though she still kept her father's hand within reach when meeting new people. The small scar on her forehead was barely visible now, hidden beneath her growing bangs. Tell me about your project, Sophia, said Mrs. Patterson, a reporter from the local newspaper who was covering the event. Sophia had volunteered to present her school project about police-community relations, inspired by her own experiences over the past year. Well, Sophia began, her voice clear and confident, my project is about how police officers and kids can understand each other better. Sometimes bad things happen because people don't take time to talk and listen. She pointed to a colorful poster board covered with drawings and photos. These are pictures of all the police officers I've met this year. Detective Morgan taught me about how investigations work. Officer Chen showed me how police dogs help find people who are lost. And Officer Williams came to my school to teach us about crossing streets safely. James stood nearby, watching his daughter with immense pride. The transformation in Sophia over the past year had been remarkable. What could have been a source of permanent trauma had instead become a catalyst for her interest in community safety and justice. She had not only overcome her fear of police officers, but had become something of a young advocate for better communication between law enforcement and the community. Sophia also started a pen pal program, Detective Morgan added, joining the conversation. She writes letters to police officers in training, telling them what it's like to be a kid who needs help. Her insights have actually been incorporated into our community policing curriculum. The reporter scribbled notes, clearly impressed by the young girl's initiative. How did you come up with the idea for the pen pal program? Sophia thought for a moment. After what happened to me, I realized that the police officer who hurt me didn't understand kids very well. He was scared of me, but I was just a kid trying to see my papa. So I thought maybe if police officers knew more about how kids think and feel, they wouldn't be so scared of us. Elena Whitmore watched from across the room, helping organize the refreshment table with other parent volunteers. She marveled at how her daughter had turned a traumatic experience into something positive that was helping others. The nightmares had stopped months ago, replaced by dreams of becoming either a police officer or a teacher who could help police officers understand children better. "Has the program been successful?" the reporter asked Detective Morgan. "Absolutely. Sophia's letters have given our trainees insights they never would have gotten otherwise. She writes about things like how scary it is when adults don't believe you, or how kids sometimes run toward things that make them feel safe rather than away from danger. It's changed how we approach situations involving children." As they talked, a familiar figure approached the booth. Marcus Bennett looked different than he had a year ago. Older, quieter, but also somehow more at peace. He wore civilian clothes and carried a small bouquet of flowers. James tensed slightly when he saw him, but Sophia surprised everyone by walking over to greet him. "Hi, Mr. Bennett," she said politely. "Are you here for the safety fair?" Marcus smiled gently. "Hello, Sophia. Yes, I wanted to see how you were doing and to bring you these flowers. I heard about your pen pal program from Detective Morgan. That's a wonderful thing you're doing." Sophia accepted the flowers with the same politeness she had shown when receiving his apology gift a year earlier. "Thank you. Are you working somewhere new now?" Marcus nodded. "I work at a counseling center now, helping people who have been through difficult experiences. What happened between us taught me that I needed to learn better ways to help people." This made sense to Sophia, who had a 9-year-old's straightforward view of cause and effect. "That's good. Do you like your new job?" "I do. It's different from being a police officer, but I'm still helping people, just in a different way." James approached and extended his hand to Marcus. Over the past year, he had followed Marcus's story through Detective Morgan. The former officer had pleaded guilty to using excessive force, receiving a suspended sentence and community service that he was still completing. More importantly, he had entered therapy and was working with organizations that trained police officers in de-escalation techniques. "Bennett," James said with a firm handshake, "I heard you've been speaking at police academies about what happened." Marcus nodded. "It's part of my community service, but I would do it anyway. If sharing my mistake can prevent other officers from making the same error, then something good can come from what I did to Sophia." Sophia listened to this exchange with interest. In her young mind, the idea that bad experiences could be turned into lessons that helped other people made perfect sense. It was exactly what she was trying to do with her own project. "Mr. Bennett," Sophia said thoughtfully, "would you like to read some of the letters I've written to police officers? Maybe they could help with your talks." Marcus looked surprised and touched by the offer. "That would be wonderful, Sophia, if you're comfortable sharing them." Sophia pulled out a folder from her project display and handed him several typed pages. "These are copies. I wrote about what it feels like to be scared and not have adults believe you, and about how kids think differently than grown-ups." As Marcus read through the letters, his eyes filled with tears. Sophia's words were simple but profound, describing exactly the kind of situation that had led to their encounter. She had articulated feelings and perspectives that could help officers understand children better and avoid the mistakes he had made. "These are incredible, Sophia," Marcus said softly. "Your insights could really help police officers do better in situations like ours." Sophia beamed with pride, pleased that her work was being recognized as important by both a former police officer and her new friends in law enforcement. Detective Morgan watched the interaction with satisfaction. The department had implemented several policy changes following Sophia's case, including mandatory training on interacting with children and new procedures for verifying claims before taking action. Sophia's story had become a case study in how community input could improve police practices. As the day continued, Sophia moved confidently between the various booths, asking questions about police equipment and procedures with the curiosity of someone who truly wanted to understand. She no longer flinched when officers approached her, instead greeting them with the enthusiasm of someone who saw them as potential allies in keeping the community safe. Elena joined James as they watched their daughter explain her project to another group of visitors. "Look at her," Elena said with wonder. "A year ago, she was afraid of anyone in uniform. Now she's teaching police officers how to do their jobs better." James nodded, his chest tight with emotion. "She's stronger than either of us imagined. She took something terrible and made it into something that will help other children." As the fair wound down, Sophia received a special recognition award from the police chief for her contributions to community policing efforts. She accepted the plaque with grace, then surprised everyone by asking if she could say something. "I want to thank all the police officers who took time to teach me this year," she said into the microphone, her young voice carrying clearly through the community center. "And I want other kids to know that if something scary happens with a police officer, it doesn't mean all police officers are scary. Most of them really do want to help us." The crowd applauded, and Marcus Bennett wiped tears from his eyes as he watched the remarkable young girl who had taught him more about being human than 15 years of police work ever had. Sophia's journey from victim to advocate had shown everyone involved that healing was possible, and that even the worst mistakes could become opportunities for growth and positive change. As the Whitmore family packed up Sophia's project materials, James reflected on how much their lives had changed since that terrible morning at the palace gates. What had started as a parent's worst nightmare had somehow evolved into a story of resilience, forgiveness, and community healing that would benefit children and police officers for years to come.